lekker om jullie hier te hear. And thanks so much for coming to join us to talk about curriculum. And there'll be sort of two parts to our meeting today. One is I'm going to talk just in general about the Green School curriculum as it affects sort of the whole school. And then Michaela's going to focus on what happens in kindergarten in general and grade R in particular. So the two of us will be having an opportunity to talk. And I want to speak first of all just a little bit about our mission statement. We're about a community of learners making our world sustainable. So there's a strong sense of community and saying that all of us are learners, parents, teachers, the children, we're a learning community, and it's about a sustainable world. And we educate for sustainability through community-centered entrepreneurial learning in a natural environment. And our holistic student-guided approach inspires and empowers us to be green leaders. And why do we need a fresh approach to education? Because Green School is doing things very, very differently. And I'm sure if you went back to your old school and walked around, as I did a couple of weeks back, I was surprised to see at my old school the classrooms were exactly the same. Pretty much the same desks and chairs were there. Went up to the teacher's desk and a pile of test papers was there, was almost exactly the same as those that I wrote 50 years ago or 40 years ago. The curriculum's the same, the routine, and yet the world in which we live has changed enormously. And yet schools and education are very much like they were 50 years ago. And I'm very proud of the education my parents gave me, but I do know that what got me here is certainly not going to get our children into the future. And we do need a radically different and fresh and new approach. Research coming out of the United States, and it's worldwide research, shows that at high school, somewhere between 65 and 70% of children are bored most of the time. And Deloitte's research shows that about 80% of adults in the workplace aren't enjoying their work. But I mean, that's a really sad indictment of our current school system. And looking into the reason why children are bored at school, the number one thing that comes out is they don't see a purpose in what they're learning. You have to do maths, you have to do science, you have to do geography. Why? Because there's a test at the end of the week or an exam. But there's no sense that there's a purposefulness to their learning. There's no sense of engagement with that learning. And so there's a real sense of disconnect. The conventional system defines our capacity for success by how much information we can remember. And the conventional thinking is just, if there's a huge curriculum and we download lots of information to kids and they have really, really enormous tests, then that's an academically rigorous curriculum. And so children very quickly learn that their success at school is measured by how much stuff they can remember. Just the volume that you can remember. I don't know if you remember, certainly this was my feeling, going into exams thinking, oh my goodness, have I learned everything? Is the exam going to show just what I don't know? Are they going to find me out? And there was that real nervousness. And I think this is probably 10-year-old research now, but during the exam time in the United Kingdom, about 140,000 or million antidepressants were handed out. Kids are on antidepressants as they face exam stress. The number one cause of teenage death in China and Australia is suicide. And exam stress is a major part of that. It's that sense of failure. And will this whole system, which is based upon preparing kids for tests and exams, simply show that they are failures? So for us at Green School, what do we want, kind of people we want our children to be? We want them to be confident, we want them to be kind, we want them to have resilience, we want them to be able to make a success of themselves in whichever way we want them to make a success of themselves. And how do we design a school around that vision? What kind of children do we want our people do we want our children to be? Green School is driven by research, and I'll be sharing some of the educational research with you, but one of the key bits of education research that drove the school was a study called Visible Learning by an Australian guy called John Hattie. It's a 50-year longitudinal study looking at what practices really drive quality teaching and learning. And number one on the list is student agency, student advocacy, that students can have a voice in what they're being taught. Our current system says, well, here's the maths curriculum, here's the history curriculum, here's the geography curriculum, learn this stuff, there's a test coming up on Friday, you better know it. But there's no sense of relevance there. And when the child is in control of their learning, then they have a real sense of ownership of it. So a little bit about the history of Green School and the Green School curriculum. John and Cynthia Hardy, the two very successful business people living in Bali, wanted to tutor their children. And they engaged a man called Alan Wagstaff to be their tutor, and they arrived at his house one day and there was a book on the table called Three Springs. And it was about his vision for a school, schooling system, which was much more than the current model. And he said we need to educate the whole child, not just the intellectual side, but also the emotional side and the spiritual side and the physical side, and that we're educating the whole child. And John and Cynthia said to Alan, well, does such a school exist? And he said, no, it hasn't been built yet. They said, well, we'll build that school. And so that's where it came from. And drawing on Wagstaff's book and Hattie's research, they developed this school system. And we want a school in which the children love learning and are curious and adventurous. As the school was established, they recruited a whole lot of international teachers. And they began to develop the Green School curriculum. And there were British teachers that took the very best of the British curriculum, and American teachers that brought the best of the American curriculum, and New Zealand teachers, and I met a Finnish teacher, Jukka from Finland, and he was revising the maths curriculum. And that's how the Green School curriculum developed. International teachers from all around the world cherry-picking the very best of curricula. And in fact, if you chat to Lene, our maths teacher up in middle and high school, she'll say, mathematics is pretty much the similar, whatever curriculum you teach, there's still fractions, there's still three-dimensional shapes, there's still operations, there's still bonds, and whether you teach it in the Cambridge curriculum, International Baccalaureate, or the American system, you're still teaching those concepts. But it's how we teach that is significantly different, and that I think is going to be the focus of what Michaela is going to be sharing with us. So what is in the curriculum, and what does the Green School curriculum look like? And that's really at the heart of what we're talking about today. So there's a mathematics curriculum, there's a language curriculum, there's a social studies curriculum, and it has been revised and developed and refined over a good number of years. We had Emily Ferguson and Leslie Medema come out from Bali to join us for our teacher training October, November, December last year, and really supported us with establishing our curriculum. And so they're the people who were really involved in establishing the curriculum. Emily now works for a school in Singapore, but we're still in regular contact with her, as we are with Leslie. So there's our maths curriculum for reception, and it's very tiny print, but there are numbers, there's space and shapes, and there's measurement. And they're learning how to count, they're learning about three-dimensional shapes, they're learning about data and data gathering. And as you make your way up the years, there's a scope and sequence for each phase or learning neighborhood of the school. And it's a really detailed and very thorough and well-tested curriculum. There's emergent literacy of English, and there's comprehension, listening, linking sounds and letters, reading. So reading, writing, listening, speaking are the four elements of any curriculum, and we call them interpretation, awareness, and expression. But you're still learning those skills. We're still doing the digestive system in science, and the water cycle in science, and we're still learning about continental drift in geography. And so those concepts are there, but it's how we teach them that is significantly different. I then had a look at the South African CAPS curriculum to benchmark what we're doing in terms of the CAPS curriculum for mathematics and language and social studies. And I went through every line of the Green School curriculum and the CAPS reference points. So for example, for number, we want to teach children to count, read, write, compare, and order numbers and numerals and words. Now the CAPS curriculum says at grade R you should be able to count up to 10. And in grade 1 you can count up to 50, in grade 2 you can count to 200, and by grade 3 you can count to 1,000. For addition and subtraction, by grade R you must add and subtract up to 10. By grade 1, 20, by grade 2, 99, and by grade 3, 999. Now if you go into our classrooms and watch our teachers teach, some of the kids are counting up to 500 in grade 1 because they love maths and they're good at it and they've got it and they understand the logic and they're zooming ahead, and other children need more support. And what we're able to do at Green School here with our teacher-student ratio, which is more than 1 to 10, but there's a 1 to 10 teacher-student ratio, and that's one of the things that really sets our school apart, is we can get to know where each child is in terms of mathematics. We can work with them and help them understand each of these concepts. If you have a look at the CAPS curriculum for foundation phase for mathematics, it's 512 pages long. It's huge. And so if you speak to any South African teacher, and I'll tell you, I'm just sprinting through the curriculum. You know, there's this section, this section, this section. And so if a child doesn't understand something, there's no time. You better catch up. So it's really important for us, particularly mathematics, but in every area of the curriculum, to say, hang on, you haven't understood long division or multiplication, let's stop, let's regroup, let's make sure you really have understood this before you go on. And so you'll find, you know, groups who really have got the mathematics and are flying ahead, and other kids who need some support and consolidation, and both things are happening. And in particular, and this is really, really important to us as a school, myself, is that Are the children loving maths and enjoying it? Do they think solving problems with numbers is a really cool thing to do? And are they coming out thinking, yeah, I'm good at maths and I enjoy it? And that emotional as well as intellectual side is really important. But what I want you to know is that there's a well-constructed curriculum. We reference it against the CAPS curriculum so that in terms of these key milestones, our children are on track. We've got experienced teachers in our group. We've got teachers over 10, 15, 20 years worth of teaching experience, and they come out of a South African system. So they know what should a child know at the end of grade 1, what should a child know at the end of grade R, and they have a really clear idea of what skills and milestones they should have reached. These aren't teachers who haven't taught before, but we've spent a lot of time looking at how we teach and doing it in a far more creative, engaging, experiential, hands-on way. So I think one of the features of our school is that there's a strong focus on teacher professionalism and autonomy. And they're able to adapt the curriculum to meet the needs of the learners. So put the child at the center and make sure they are at the center of what we're doing, and not simply getting through the curriculum as quickly as we can. We also teach green studies. Our focus is on education for sustainability, and we'll talk a little about our thematic program. But in addition to our just go ahead. We've got our proficiency theme, and that's mathematics and languages and the sciences. Our thematic frame are integrated units of study, our local environment, our African environment, and the experiential frame are the hands-on, experiential, getting out there, doing it, forms of learning. So those are the three ways in which we teach, and we've got our green school skills and our green school values, which drive what we're doing. And our pedagogical approach is to be relationship-centered, experiential, activist, and local to global. I forgot what the L was. As one talks to universities, what are they looking for in the world of work in terms of the skills that students will need to succeed? Current research shows that 2/3 of South African children who start university do not graduate. So our current education system is not preparing young people to graduate. They're learning to the test, they're learning to pass the test, but they cannot think for themselves. They've got a low level of responsibility for their learning. So they're waiting for the teacher to hand it to them. And we want our children to have learning and innovation skills. They've got to be able to work in the world of information, media, and technology skills, and life and career skills. My daughter's 26 and just started work for the Zip Zap Circus Company. Not started work, she's been there a year, as their social media person. And that's a full-time job. That's a job that didn't exist 5 years ago. And I didn't know when she left school or when we did our subject choice evening what subjects she would take, but certainly being a social media person for a non-profit organization doing great work in the community in Cape Town, that would possibly be a job. And I overheard her chatting to some friends on the weekend and saying, no, there's always work for social media people. Every company needs one. Now, that isn't a conversation we had 5 years ago. And what's going to be the next generation of jobs? What's the next Uber? What's the next Google? What's the next Amazon? And how do we create in our children an entrepreneurial, creative spirit that enables them to think beyond the boundaries? So these are our green school skills. I think you'll have seen these all around the school, but we do want our children, what kind of people do we want to produce? People who think creatively, can activate, be aware, know themselves well. Those are our 9 skills. I won't go through all of them, but these are the skills that will enable them to succeed in the fast-changing world of the future. So I want to put this point to you. It's not about getting into university as it is about graduating. And perhaps more importantly, finding out what's my purpose. What career ought I to choose? And I'm sure many of us, being like my daughter, who tried medicine first, and then tried this, and then tried graphic design, and then found her feet. But it took her several starts in life to find out who she was. And it wouldn't have been wonderful if the schooling system had enabled her to find out what is her purpose and what makes her tick, and then we could have designed a learning journey around that. Language. The curriculum is in beide tale aangebied. The majority of our children in school are English speaking, but we want to make sure that there's a balance of languages in the class and that children grow up in a richly multilingual environment. So if you were in Michaela's class this morning, they were singing hello in 10 different languages. And it's a really international feel. And we want our children to grow up really functionally bilingual. Now, it's a work in progress, and we've got a series of workshops at the moment just saying, well, what does this look like? And what does it look like in kindergarten and primary and middle school? In terms of university admissions, what happens and can you get into university from Green School, and will your child have access to university? And this is a quote taken from the matriculation board, and it says, for international universities, so you must have an American high school diploma from a school that is NEASC accredited, I'll talk about that presently, with the SATs optional. For South African universities, there are 3 requirements set by the matriculation board. The school must be accredited by one of the accreditation board, of which the New England Association is one, or you write advanced placements, or you write the SAT scores, standardized achievement test scores, and those are the requirements for access to a South African university with an international qualification. And our children will have a high school diploma from a NEASC accredited school, and they will have the option, if they want, to write SATs. There's a lot of controversy about SATs, and the more you read about it, people are saying, well, they're a thing of the past, but they're still used by local and international universities for admissions. And if you go to any local university's website, there's a Stellenbosch University for undergrad international applications, and if you have a look at the requirements for students who come out of the American system, those requirements that I've shown you are here. So that's from Stellenbosch University's webpage. And they've also got requirements for international baccalaureate and the French system and the German system and the Cambridge system and so on. Green School Bali has been operating now for 12 years, and this is where their graduates have gone from 2013 to 2020. It's difficult to read these, but just know that students have got into quality universities, largely in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, because they are American, Australian, and New Zealand students, and they've got into universities there. So students who've attended Green School in Bali have attended quality universities in their hometowns. And that's where, also a number of them have gone for gap years and have gone for travel, haven't gone just straight to university. But just know that there's a solid track record from Green School Bali of children getting to quality universities in their home countries. I want to talk a little bit about the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. This is a quality assurance body. So we have sought and researched what is the best quality assurance body to quality assure what we're doing. How do we know that our curriculum is on track? Green School International is still a very small and growing organization. There's a school in Bali, there's a school in New Zealand, as ourselves. There's a very small group of people who are working part-time, but it hasn't got a central office, as you would say with Cambridge exams or International Baccalaureate, where there's a whole team of people. So Green School International isn't placed and isn't accredited to be a quality assurance body. Whereas the New England Association of Schools and Colleges is, and they've been around since 1885, they're based in Boston in the United States, and they started off quality assuring American public schools and then American independent schools. And remember, the American model is that each school approaches the local university to say, Stellenbosch, your maths department, what do you need Green School kids to be able to do and know in order to get into Stellenbosch? And the Stellenbosch maths department say, well, they need to be able to do these sort of 20 things. Here's the standards, and then the school goes away and prepares a curriculum that prepares children for entrance to the university. South Africa, there's one national exam that everybody writes, and depending on your results from that one national exam, you now are considered for universities countrywide. But the American model is much more about each school or each county or each state preparing its students for entry into university. So New England Association of Schools and Colleges said, well, how do we quality assure the work that's being done by each school in our community, and let's have a set of standards. So they've been around since 1885, and they have also an international education wing, and they quality assure international schools worldwide. And they look at every aspect of the schools. They look at teaching and learning, governance, leadership, health and safety, ethical standards. Do your teachers have contracts? Are they well employed? So they look at every element of the school, and it's a lengthy process. You can apply in your first year of operation, and you have a foundation standards visit, which can only first take place in your second year of operation. And they come in and take an audit of your school, what's going well, what's your school's ethos and vision and mission, where do you need to improve, are there any red flags? And then you have a candidacy phase, somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, in which you can address all of those issues. And then there's a full-on accreditation visit, And at the end of that accreditation visit, you're either fully accredited or accredited with things to do, or they say, wait, you've still got work to do. And so we're on track to have our foundation standards visit in the second half of this year, and in 18 months to 2 years, it'll probably be 2024, we'll have our full accreditation visit. And then thereafter, there's a 5-yearly review. So they come back to check and see how things are going in your school. This is a picture of me and my school in Dubai, and that's Jeff Bradley, who's the National Director or International Director for Quality Assurance. So I took my school in Dubai through its NIASC accreditation at the same time as its International Baccalaureate accreditation. I'm currently a visitor, we call, but the lead inspector would be a less kind term for NIASC. I've just done one of these for a big American international school in the Middle East, so I've been on the giving end as well as the receiving end. So I've got a clear idea of how does this process work and what will we need to have in place to ensure that those standards are met. But it's not a quick and easy process, and it's very much about the school reflecting on itself and continually wanting to improve. And any good school, and ourselves too, are always wanting to look at what are we doing well, where's there room for improvement, how do we continue to improve that, and we as a school community need to have continually just that self-reflective process. So how does an American high school diploma work for those of you South African? So learners earn credits, and over 4 years, that's grade 9, 10, 11 and 12, you'll amass 26 credits. Think of it more like university than school. When you were at university, you chose what you wanted to major in, your degree, your 2 majors in final year, what you do in second year, what you do in first year. And you made sure that you had sufficient courses along the way to major in those subjects. So for example, I majored in English, and I had to do English 1, English 2, English 3, and I also did some courses in Greek and Roman literature and philosophy, and did a course in geology and a whole lot of ancient courses to support my English training. And I'm sure too, those of you who went to university, similarly would have chosen your subjects. There would be a fair bit of flexibility in your subjects in order to choose your major. It has to meet a minimum course expectation, so there's a number of hours set for the tuition. And so 1 credit is 1 year's teaching. So perhaps in comparison to the Southern curriculum, there's far more choice. So there's mathematics offered in all 4 grades, as is English, Afrikaans, science. And then the science has the potential, should the students want, to divide into physics, chemistry and biology. Mathematics, similarly too, there's geometry and calculus and algebra, and then business mathematics. Humanities, will be history and geography, environmental studies, enterprise studies and so on. But what this allows, if you look at these electives, and there are 6 electives along the way, and that's doesn't add up there, but there are 26 credits there, is that a student heading for accounting will do a lot of mathematics courses and a few science courses, and amass some other courses too, but there would be a weighting towards mathematics. A student wanting to go into web design, graphic design, and the creative field will do far more digital design, arts courses and so on. Both can finish school with 26 credits, but have much more of a career direction focus in what they're doing. Now we're a small school, and so the menu is going to be pretty sort of regimented. You'll have to do mathematics, you'll have to do English, you'll have to do humanities. But as the school grows and the number of children grow, we'll be able to offer more specialized courses. And so we're living in a world now where there's just a whole range, for example, of sort of online blended learning courses. So that kid who wants to do, gaming design or something like that, well, let's see if we can find a course that child could do under the umbrella of the school's curriculum, which would allow them to pursue their digital design career choices. But each course is a year's credit, so mathematics in grade 9 is 1 credit, and those are graded. There's a grade point average. You will have heard of GPAs, and that's how it's assessed. And I'll go into further detail with that when we do assessment in the middle years. In terms of just referencing the high school curriculum, we use the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics and English. This is the national curriculum of the United States. Speak to any American, of course, they'll say, oh, no, Common Core is useless. I'm from Virginia. Virginia's standards are much higher, or Delaware's standards are much higher. But this is one national curriculum reference point, and we're able to make sure that we meet those standards along the way. So that's the what we're doing, but the how we're doing it is significantly in terms of experiential and inquiry-based and hands-on. Certainly where we differ is assessment. And just talking about the research and what is the research telling us. This is the University of Durham, and they have a body called the CEM, Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, and they did some meta-research recently, looking at the strength of the research. And simply what they're saying to us, of all the possible interventions you could put in place in a school to prep your school or improve your school, what interventions would have the greatest effect? And what will it cost you, and what will the improvement in learning be? So it's literally bang for buck. And here's their graph. So impact versus cost. So this is cost per pupil, this is the impact. This quadrant is not worth it. This sector here is maybe worth it, and the top here is really promising. So interesting. It's not worth it. There's not much relationship between smaller classes. I was really surprised to see that. You'd think smaller classes would make a big difference. After school activities, teaching assistance, mentoring, performance pay, homework in primary, very little impact for homework in primary. Look at the top here, feedback and metacognition and peer tutoring right at the top. So are we giving the right feedback at the right time to enable kids to improve? And so it's ensuring that, I often use the analogy of a golf swing. And if you've got a golf coach, the golf coach is with you, and as you take a swing and hit the ball and goes to the he says, oh no, you've got to stand there, turn your shoulders, bend your knees, left arm straight, and is always helping you to improve your swing. But the coach is giving you that feedback right there at that time, is able to see the common mistake that you might have made, and you can quickly see the improvement. And so if you watch mathematics being taught in reception and in the primary school, you'll see teachers working with kids, helping guide them through the learning activities that they're doing, giving the feedback right then and there, so the kids think, oh yes, okay, so I missed out that step, great, I can get this done. And so we're giving feedback in the right way, at the right time, in order to provide that feedback on learning. So we provide feedback for learning, which is the feedback that you give along the way, formative feedback, informal, often sort of low visibility, just a word from the teacher to you. At the end of a unit, or at the end of a module, we'll have a summative assessment, and an assessment as learning, that's what that research was saying, is, are you learning how to learn? And are you learning from the assessment? And is the assessment part of the learning journey? That's a big topic, and I don't want to get too far from curriculum into assessment, but we wanting to ensure that the assessments that we're giving really do promote student learning. Back to the analogy of the golf swing. Imagine if you took a couple of shots, and then a week later you got a report from your coach, and it gave you 4 out of 10 for golf swings. That wouldn't be really helpful. Or your piano tutor. But if the person is sitting next to you giving that feedback right then and there, you could well say, now I know how come I played the tune wrong, or how come I swung the golf shot wrong. So it's giving that feedback at the right time. So yes, there are termly reports, but you won't have your year summarized as 4, pleasing progress. Because what does that tell you? Well, 5. It's 5 good, it's 5 bad. But you will say, this term, this is what we've been seeking to teach. I can do this, I have mastered this. These are the skills and competencies that I have learnt. I just want to talk a little bit about time spent on assessment. And most schools are spending somewhere between 30 to 40% of their time on assessment. If you think the time off for exam weeks and tests and so on, it's a big chunk of time. Because we don't stop school for exam time, there's much more time teaching. And so your kids are just spending a whole lot more time in classrooms being taught by the teachers. Assessment's happening along the way, but teaching's happening all the way through the school term. And that's really important. And I want to finish up with just 2 quotes. One from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the other from John Dewey. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote at the height of the French Enlightenment, in 1780, 1790. And he said this, let him not be taught science, let him discover it. If ever you substitute authority for reason, you'll cease to reason, and become a mere plaything of other people's thoughts. So don't teach him science, let him discover it for himself, and let him engage in a learning journey. So what I want to say is, yes, we're doing really innovative things in education, but it builds on a rich tradition of Western education philosophy and African education philosophy. And then John Dewey, who was working in the United States, late 1800s, early 1900s, said, give the people something to do, not something to learn. And the doing is of such a nature as to demand thinking, learning naturally results. is about saying, give the children meaningful learning activities that they are. Now I understand that. So we stand upon the shoulders of a rich tradition of education research and education thinking, and wanting to draw on the very best of that. I'm going to hand over now to Michaela, who's going to be able to focus on what's happening in reception. And sorry,
Yes.
I had rambled on a bit.
No worries.
Andy, can I just ask one question if you don't mind? Just with regards to